Welcome to the Product Design Podcast. I'm your host, Seth Coelen, founder of UX Cabin, where we create world-class web and mobile apps. I'm excited to bring you a behind-the-scenes look into the lives of some of the most interesting and talented people in product design. We'll get strategic advice on how they got to where they are today and things they wish they would have known earlier in their career. Hey, what's up, everyone? Thank you so much for joining in this episode of the Product Design Podcast. Today, we have Scott Hurff with us. He is the founder and chief product officer at Churnkey. Scott, thanks so much for being with us today.
Awesome. Good to see you, Seth. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So, here in Santa Monica, California, just got cold. So that's a nice thing. I am founder and chief product officer of Churnkey, and I help SaaS founders and operators stop worrying about churn, all types, cancellations to failed payments, so they can focus on product and growth. And the classic, template of a so-called creative living in Los Angeles, I'm what they call a multi-hyphenate. So I'm a product designer, I'm a founder, I'm a head of marketing, copywriter, and that's just all at Churnkey. But then I also did write a book on product design, and I still continue writing science fiction. So, there's always something new to be jumping into over here.
Wow. That sounds like you definitely have a full plate. But yeah, why don't we kind of dive in and give us your origin story of how you even got into this space in the first place?
Yeah. I mean, growing up, I wanted to build businesses that made money, so I honestly didn't have to work anywhere. And I think it's actually pretty similar to your journey, making websites, realizing, you get that feeling, I think you put it, it's like this insane life hack that I got money making a website and I didn't know anything about making a website before that. So it makes you become really adaptable and flexible on the fly. You want more of this thing and more of this feeling, but you don't know anything about it. So you have to, empathize with people to understand their needs. You're selling, right? You have to teach yourself skills on the fly. What's HTML? At the time, it was Dreamweaver, and I do have to, as an aside, thank whoever pirated Photoshop in the 90s. That was my gateway drug to product design. So thank you, Whereas sites and serial cracking apps and all that. I'm sure I gave my parents 1 billion viruses on their Windows machine. But yeah, it's also having the confidence to be whoever I wanted to be to make this vision happen, right? So overnight, I'm suddenly a web designer. Now I'm a startup founder and chief product officer and head of marketing. So that dynamic continues to this day, 25 years later. Wow. I think
the cool thing for me about web design was it felt like for anything in life, you had to have someone train you and show you and give you permission on how to do something.
Exactly.
And web design was one of those first things where it was no one really knows how to do it. There's not really a guidebook. There's different ways that you can come about it. There's not a specific, formula or whatever. But you didn't have to know anyone. You didn't have to have anything handed to you or certificates or whatever. You could just make your own path and kind of figure it out. And I feel when I got into it back in 2010, it was just a really cool paradigm shift, because it was you can get into this without permission. You can get into it without having a degree. And it's all about just can you provide some level of value to someone? It's they don't know how to figure it out. They can't figure it out. They don't want to. They feel you have to have a degree or certification or experience or whatever, but it's it's so cool. You can just do this on your own time and figure it out and get better at it and try to repeat and do it again.
Yeah. And the essential ingredient to that I realized to this day was communicating and engendering trust in that person, that what you're talking about, that, you're competent and, you're going to deliver on this product that you're promising. Right. And, those are timeless values and timeless traits to have. And so I know, I just think it's interesting. How did making a website come to embody all of these life skills have all these intersections with creativity and people and all that. It feels like a really, odd place in history, or like odd dynamic in history that could happen.
Right.
And, I'm riding that wave as long as I can,
Yeah. So getting your like feet wet into it, how did you go from, making websites to, being this founder and chief product officer? What were kind of like the steps in between that kind of chained its way to get you to where you are today?
Yeah, I think one giant leap was realizing, at the time, web apps were a fairly new concept. Like, why do these feel different than websites, static websites? And then you realize, like, well, I'm actually witnessing a product. I'm using a product. How do I build a product, right? And there was this fantastic book that I think is aged very well, and I don't think will age out, is Basecamp. Oh, depending on who, I guess they're back to calling themselves 37 Signals now, but there's this book called Getting Real. And it was just this foundational read for me. It was about 2004. And it was just this no nonsense way to think about products on the web, what makes a product, how to identify a need and serve that need, and had to build it out. And so when I ran into that, I realized, whoa, okay, I can take the skills I learned building these kind of boring websites and turn that into something that has like ongoing utility. And I never really did learn how to code past CSS. And that's one of my like kind of big regrets. But once I had that moment, that light bulb moment, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I actually went and built, kids don't do this in college, don't build group software in college. It's never going to work. For fraternities, sororities, groups, it's the worst idea ever. But somehow I got the attention of a venture capital firm, and they gave this, this ambitious college kid an entrepreneur in residence title. They basically paid me to work on my ideas. And then I went to work at it's crazy. It was such a bizarre time. It was like 2006, 2007. I was living out of a hotel in the outskirts of Boston, just going into this venture capitalist office, for half a year or whatever. And I had no idea what I was doing. They could definitely tell that, but I learned a lot on the ground. So yeah, that cemented that career path for me. Those people taking a chance on me. And sometimes that's all it takes.
So did you like apply to like work with them? Did they see you from some random place? How did that connection form?
Yeah, this was one of those just right place, right time things. I went to Wake Forest, a school in Winston-Salem, go Deeks. And Wake Forest had started this entrepreneurship program where they would give you office space, they give you funding, they give you grants, and then they'd have these experts come in and talk to you about problems you were having. And they started a course on venture capital. And this VC, name was John Abraham. Great guy, like put me through the ringer. Just, so you want to start a company. Okay. What are you going to do with this product? How are you going to define, increase engagement, find your customers, all this stuff. And he made me write these like academic papers looking back on, product and growth and these sorts of things back at a time when there weren't a lot of blogs or podcasts around, So he decided to take a chance on me, and I just was relentless. I really wanted to get his help raising money for this thing. He's like, I'm not going to give you money for this. I'll just give you money in general, and then we'll see if this idea is what works out. It probably won't, and that's okay. And yeah, that taught me like, no idea is the last idea, right? It's just an idea. You'll find another idea if it doesn't work out. And it didn't work out. I'm glad it didn't.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important because I think people, especially early people in like the product space, they try to think about the perfect product, and that does two bad things for you. So you spend all your time waiting for the perfect idea, for the perfect product. Number one, you're missing out on some of your like quote unquote mediocre ideas that you don't think have legs. You're not exploring that. You're not, potentially hitting gold on something else.
Right.
Number two, when that perfect one does come along, at least in your mind, you become so attached to it that you are not willing to let it go, even if the writing is clearly on the wall that it's not going to be a success. So I think in product, it's like quality comes from a quantity of ideas and a quantity of trying things. And it's like the first thing you build, the first idea you have is really just going to be for you to learn, for you to get all your mistakes out. And you got to like flush that sewer water of your first idea. Same thing in like design. You just got to get through the reps of it and like, become addicted to playing with ideas and workflows,
I love that.
products, and don't be so fixated on the specific idea of this, revolutionary product idea.
There's a similar process in writing fiction that has a lot of overlap to this. And, one of my dreams is to write a science fiction novel, have it published by a big traditional publisher. And you know what? Yeah, I want to write a Star Wars novel too. Okay. Is it that much to ask? So, but I haven't had anything published yet. And I've been writing fiction for 7 years now. And it started out, I love science fiction. I'd read a bunch of novels and I go, this one didn't quite hit for me. I think I could do it better. And, this is just like classic creative person being like, oh, how hard is it? Right. And that's, honestly how I got into web design and product design and starting a company. So I figured, why couldn't I do it here? But it's very humbling to realize when you're starting from scratch, what you have in your head is not going to be as good as the thing you make the first time. And to your point, get used to the flow of ideas and intermixing and just getting the reps in, because that's what you got to do. And being so precious about your first novel draft, it is terrible, right? So let go of it, get the criticism, learn from it, move on, make the next thing, because you can always make the next thing.
Totally. And the beautiful thing about digital products is that it's, other than your time and your effort, it's free, right? You're not going and buying a bunch of wood and supplies where you are, making a huge investment financially and gonna scrap a bunch of materials if you do it wrong. It's cool. You can, undo, you can redo, you can refactor, you can throw it away. You can reuse in your next project, things like that. It's a beautiful thing to be able to just kind of create things from nothing.
Yeah. I mean, living in that sense, in this sort of age of abundance, I feel like a Fed chairman said that. I forget his name, but we are so lucky. We're so blessed to have this ability where I don't have to have huge capital investments. And I think that can backfire on people too, where I think maybe sometimes people take too much of other people's ideas, right? Because it's just easy to remix and ideas are cheap. And there is a culture of sharing in the design community, which is awesome. But I do worry that leads to a uniformity, because we're all looking at the same stuff now. And that's why I push people to just expose themselves to ideas outside of product design. Like, I love mid-century California Pacific design. It's like a very specific visual trend. And I went to redesign the Churnkey website. It was it was pretty generic SaaS V1, B2B type design. And I wanted something that just felt organic and real and tangible and different and exciting. So I was looking at books for weeks. I wasn't looking at Dribble or, surfing the top 10 SaaS B2B websites. I just wanted to get out of that and create something just fresh. Right. So I think borrowing ideas from outside, whether it's your first time or whether it's your 100th time, if you're drawn to things outside of the digital world, that's healthy, right? Nature and architecture and movie posters and things like that.
Yeah. No, I think you're definitely onto something, because I don't know if you've seen that study, but it's like the world is becoming less colorful. And if you look at anything from car design and colors to logo design to interior design, everything's trending in this more minimal and clean space. And coming away from like the unique characteristics and color of the past. So just for like cars, for example, the color of cars that you would see on a normal road have basically been reduced to like navy blue, black, and white, and an occasional red sports car or whatever.
Right.
And like everything in like industrial design has totally shifted to like brutalism. And there's no like character in the, the buildings, the garbage cans, the benches. It's all very utilitarian. And, I think the same thing is true with like branding and websites. And it's like all the characters of the fonts and the unique logos are just like streamlined and like clean, and they all kind of look the same. Like they all look good, but they all look the same. And obviously that's true for websites and products too, to a degree.
Yeah, I've seen that there was a similar study that I didn't know about the car thing and the industrial design thing. That's depressing. In fashion logos, though, they're all like Balenciaga, and I'm not a big fashion dude, but yeah, they're all trending towards the same bold font, and it's because the theory is that they need to represent themselves in small thumbnails on shopping websites, so they need to pop, right?
Perfect.
So they all look the same then, but you're missing the beauty of these hand-drawn old logos. Like I've become a Formula One fan in the past year, and Valtteri Bottas is my guy, and he moved to Alfa Romeo, and Alfa Romeo still has this beautiful 1930s era, hand-drawn cursive logo. It's thick, it's very distinct. The curves are beautiful, and you don't see stuff like that anymore. At least, I mean, you do see some, I don't know, modern brush script, logos that are kind of lame, but it just feels different.
Becoming more homogenized. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm noticing there's nostalgia I see a lot of nostalgia for like 90s Taco Bells, purple and pastel colors and funny shapes. And also 90s electronics, that they were bold colors, Bondi blue, iMac and all that.
Game Boy, Pac-Man, Retro.
Game Boy. That's right.
Hey, so cool. We talked about you kind of getting your start in kind of that VC entrepreneurship space. What did you do next? Obviously that product didn't take off, but what was the next phase of your career?
Yeah, the cool thing about being at a VC firm is they had a bunch of portfolio companies I could basically choose from. And I had warm intros to the founders and CEOs, and I'd basically be working with any of them if I wanted to. And I chose one in North Carolina called Channel Advisor. Worked with the founder and CEO, Scott Wingo, just a brilliant guy. My first kind of dip in the B2B space, and they helped e-commerce merchants sell across eBay, Amazon, et cetera, and like optimize ads and stuff. So, it was very like technical and a very different world than I wanted to go into. But I have this joke with my wife. It's like, anytime I don't think I'll ever do something, I end up doing it. So I was like, I will never start a B2B SaaS company ever. This is like the last time I'm doing this. Here I am, 10 years later. So I learned a lot there. And then I got the consumer app bug though. And I met this team through a buddy of mine, Noah Kagan at the time, that brought me out to LA. I've been, I cold emailed Noah back in like 2005 or something. And we still chat occasionally. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. I think I might see him in Austin in a few weeks here. So it's fun. It's one of those like relationships where you kind of get each other. You don't have to, chat that often, but just like, hey man, thinking of you,
That power of cold email. That's sweet.
Yeah. Yeah. He's a great dude. Very successful now. So I'm going to have to get some tips from him. But so came out here, got into consumer apps. We spent 5 years riding off VC money, making every consumer app you could possibly invent, live chat in the browser to photo sharing and blah, blah, blah. And then we ended up at Tinder. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
You guys were building your own products, just testing out different ideas, raising money, building teams, stuff like that?
Yeah, we were lucky. I mean, we were really good at fundraising. So Chihuahua at Kleiner Perkins at the time gave us, I don't know, like 5 million, and we made it last. And for a while there, we were building basically an indie Netflix. So it was called chill.com. And we were producing comedy specials with like Maria Bamford and Greg Proops and selling them on our platform exclusively. And this was
Really?
Yeah, it was so fun to see that side. I love like Hollywood production stories and those details. So like they basically film every comedy show twice, back to back. And the audience has to show up in the same place every time and laugh just as hard both times. So it was really fun to see that bit. We learned a lot on that.
So what happened with Tinder then? You guys were part of the first acquisition, or did Tinder acquire you?
Yeah, so our team was brought on in mostly like an acqui-hire situation. This was around 2014. I think Kleiner was kind of cleaning up their portfolio or their balance sheets or whatever. And they basically told us we needed to pivot into a different space, into making mobile apps, not making content. Because we had talked about raising money for a content fund. And I think it could have been successful, but very different economics. So we completely shifted out of that business overnight, had to lay off half the team. And then we're stuck with, okay, what do we do now? Down to the bare bones team. We created something called Tappy. It was basically a very intimate photo sharing and chat app. Imagine like a private TikTok with just your friends and family. So we came in initially to like bump up their messaging platform, but I ended up building out some of their most successful revenue features because that's just where they were at the time. A lot of people don't know this, but it's more public now because they got rolled up into the Match group they spun out of IAC. But Match had always owned Tinder. Tinder was built in an incubator that a Match and IAC owned. So it was always a portfolio company of theirs. And the hatchet came down from above, the sword of Damocles, the revenue sword of Damocles, that time to turn on the money game, guys. And so I ended up creating, this is crazy. I created SuperLike, became their most successful revenue feature. And years later, my co-founder, Rob, would use that feature to find his wife on Tinder. Yeah.
So for those of us who don't know, what is SuperLike?
Yeah. I forget a lot. Not a lot of people are in the Tinder world. That's great. Stay away if you don't have to get in there. SuperLike was a way of breaking. So Tinder at its core is a game, right? You're liking, disliking. And this concept was created by Jonathan Badin. He invented the swipe, and I got to work with him. One of the kindest, most brilliant people I've ever met. And he really helped me up my game. And so the theory was, well, what if you could pay to break the game of Tinder? Because it's a double blinds game, and that's what makes it fun. No one knows whether you're going to get a like or not. And so you keep swiping. And then you get that dopamine rush when, oh, someone matched with you, now what? Now you can chat with them and all that good stuff. The idea was SuperLike would break that model where you would indicate to someone, hey, I've basically already liked you. This is a guaranteed match. So if you think I'm cute or whatever, like me right now, and we're guaranteed to have a discussion. So you could pay to get like 5 super likes a day, I think was the initial model.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So it was really interesting seeing that from the inside.
Wow.
And, it's like a bad day there. It's like, oh, we only made $50,000 today off this.
Right.
Yeah.
So what was your role at Tinder then?
Yeah. So my title was lead, what was it? Product manager and lead designer. That's what it was. So an interesting study in like kind of design organizational dynamics. So, you could be both when I came on, a PM and a designer. And that bifurcated over time as a distinct design organization grew up and a distinct, product management organization grew up. And I didn't like that. I wanted to do both. I could do both. It's like, why choose between two things I'm really good at? So
right.
I left before I had to make that choice. But it was just interesting seeing that dynamic take place and take root. It makes sense. After a certain point, you kind of have to have an organization that's pretty clean like that.
Tell us a little bit what it's like working at like a unicorn startup, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah. Tinder was unique in that the press loved all the drama it generated because it did generate lots of drama. And I came on literally weeks after an infamous Christmas party that changed dating app history. Whitney Wolf was a very early, some would say co-founder of Tinder, and left under some pretty rough circumstances involving sexual harassment lawsuits and all these things. She went on to found Bumble, which is incredibly successful. And I think actually Match may have acquired them. I can't remember. There's this adage in the dating industry that like, eventually you're either going to fail or get bought by Match. That's just how it works.
Nice.
So yeah, I mean, it was just a little disconcerting. You work on your own stuff for years, you get bought, you come on to this really cool team, and then all this bad news is coming out. And you can see it was a small team. It was 30 people, including us at the time. So a lot of intense focus and just, secretive meetings and all that and weird dynamics you don't understand. And so I just say, when you're coming into a place like that, just give yourself time to kind of marinate in the politics and don't take sides too early and just do good work, and that's what'll keep you around. It does take a toll on your mental game though. But the cool part was I got to work at insane scale and much in the same way I had done for 5 years. So I was just working in Sketch and Quartz Composer at the time and coming up with stuff I thought was cool. And then it's like, okay, let's ship it. Oh, that went out to 20 million people, or whatever the number was. And it's just tough to grasp that scale. But it's also cool to say, hey, buddy of mine living across the country, open up the app. I made that,
Right. So did you guys do like, when you had like a feature that you wanted to push out, did you like do a bunch of like user testing in private groups or private like test groups? Or were you guys more of like, hey, let's push this out, see what happens on the like actual live app and then adjust from there?
Oh, it was fast and loose those days, man. Eventually we started rolling things out to different app store locales just to see what the data was. But, we basically just walk it around the office like, hey, do you think this is cool or not? No, it's not cool. Okay. I guess I'll fix that. And then, eventually everyone's like, yeah, looks good. All right. I just submitted it. Oh, I didn't know you did that.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, the rollout process in the first year I was there was not different than I had been used to. I had like a 3-person team with significantly less user base. But yeah, so for some of the new revenue features, we would test price points in Australia or New Zealand or Germany. And what we would find out was, you'd get a sense of, price elasticity and sensitivity. Like consumers at the time in Australia would pay a lot more than people in, I think, Canada, for example.
Really?
Yeah, just really interesting, like economic dynamics. And, I don't know what was responsible for it, but could be exchange rates, could be, who knows, right? A reception to the feature. And then you'd see where people dropped off and if it increased match rates. That was one metric that to this day is still, I think, pretty significant for Tinder's health is how many people are matching per day, per month, and all that. How many conversations are being had? How long are they being had? It's a weird product because when you're successful, you lose 2 customers at least, right? So you always have to refresh the pond and keep people playing the game in a way, which is what it is.
So this is something that I've always wondered, and maybe you can provide some light on. So it's like, obviously Tinder's super popular and used by tons of people. How does it go from 0 to 1, where you kind of have to have a ton of people on it using it for it to be useful at all? So it could be the most fully featured app and does everything. But if there's not a ton of people in your location using it, it's not going to go anywhere. So
Right.
I don't know if you have any insight into how it initially started to get users that were all around each other and that could also match with each other.
Classic cold start problem, right? And it's especially hard here because it's effectively a marketplace. So you have to have, to your point, both sides. What they would do was and this is pretty clever in the early days, Justin Mateen, one of the co-founders with Sean Rad, I think he either threw parties a lot or was in a fraternity that did or something. I forget the details. But what they would do is they'd stage these really big parties and bring together like frat A, sorority B. To get in, you need to have the app, sign up, and they would keep at the time the geofence like pretty tight. So suddenly you get 200 people in a very tight geo who then, it's like remember that feeling like getting on Facebook for the first time? You feel like, oh, I recognize that person. Yep. They were in my class, right? So they replicated that dynamic because that playbook was still pretty fresh at the time. And it was pretty well publicized because Facebook was getting out of colleges or had gotten out of colleges. So yeah, they replicated this model on campuses initially.
Wow.
And it just kind of spread from there. And
that's crazy.
A lot of on the ground, maneuvering and the minutia of that, the logistics of that would, take time and money to formulate, but it worked out beautifully, obviously.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So you've obviously worked with a lot of designers, product designers, UI, UX. You've probably hired a bunch too. And, if someone's out there listening and saying like, I want to work at that next, budding startup or that next big unicorn, like from your perspective, what advice would you give for people who want to stand out and be able to, get the attention of those companies to actually get hired on or get a chance to work there?
Yeah. The first step is understanding people and, being able to talk to their needs in a certain context and translate those needs into a solution. And that's really what you're enabling by being a product designer. Whether or not you're using the latest color palette or whatever, like who cares? As long as the product fulfills the promise. That's one thing at Casa, I don't know. Are you familiar with Bitcoin? You know what Bitcoin is by now, but are you into it or do you dabble at all?
I would say I'm a little deeper into it than most.
Cool. Okay. So about self-custody versus custodial, personal keys, all that kind of stuff. So Casa, we kind of created the category of like personal key management. And to make Casa successful, you have to understand and empathize with, okay, so I'm entrusting you, random company called Casa, with a significant and meaningful amount of money, right? And so what I did was like, I understood, okay, address that need up front and explain all the way through what you're doing. And if there's any part of the process that freaks this person out, give them, not an eject button, like a bat phone, right? You could get us on the phone and have us explain things to you. So that's one example of just understanding the context and the problem and the promise. Second, I would say, like, don't wait for permission or ask for permission to get into this field. Just learn new skills like typography or start designing it effectively. This goes back to writing my first novel or, like being precious with your first product ideas. Like, you're going to need to work that canvas. You're going to need to churn out a lot of stuff before something feels right. And it is a feeling that you can cultivate, because I would say the third pillar is sample widely. Sample products that, go out and look at old products that were successful. Like, why was Microsoft Word initial effort successful versus Lotus 1-2-3? Go and understand the history of, we have a rich history in our field. Let's go and understand it, right? Intuit, Scott Cook at Intuit basically created, a lot of people think he created like modern product management, but it was effectively drafting off of a role that Procter and Gamble invented in the 1930s. called the brand man, minus the brand, be the brand person today if it was created today.
Sure.
But yeah, so sample widely, cultivate that feeling and that taste where if something feels off, why does it feel off? If something is right or effective, what made it effective? And it's not just looking at apps, it's back to my point. Just get out and look at all kinds of, not just software, but experiences. Does Disney as a product work? And in what ways does it work? Is it Disney Plus, or is it the magical guest experience? Is it walking up to a cruise ship and not having to show my ID because they've got facial recognition, just letting me check in, things like that. So yeah, that's what I'd say for people breaking in.
Totally. So what did being at Tinder teach you about product design and UX?
Yeah, it really reinforced the notion that in consumer products, the UI is the product. When people envision Tinder, they don't envision the date they went on. They might, you want them to, but they think about the card stack and the game pads, what we call them internally. But it's easy to forget that there's a lot more to that under the surface. So, remembering that there is an algorithm always working in the background to surface relevant matches to you, that you need to get a lot of permissions working in tandem for this product to operate, like geo permissions and push notifications and access to Facebook. All these things are part of the system that enable, that core piece of UI. And then the second bit is, if you want to make a lot of money and you have a core rule set by which your app operates, if you let people pay to break those rules, you will make a lot of money. And that's what SuperLike did, so they broke the model. That's how my co-founder met his wife. It's let people get an edge if they're willing to pay for it. It may sound crass to some, but it works,
Yeah. No, that's super interesting. This is kind of an out of the blue question, but obviously with the acquisition of Twitter by Elon and him trying to monetize and bring revenue that's in a separate form than just advertising, do you have any UX or product ideas that Twitter might be able to tap into? From a new revenue standpoint?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've been on Twitter since 2006, and I think I'm literally like user number 6,500 or something. You used to be able to see that. And, I've gotten so much utility out of Twitter. It's changed my career. It's unlocked access to people like you. And so it needs to stick around and it needs to stay healthy. And it's still primarily a text medium, but it's still extremely, Elon tweeted this the other day. It's one of the most interesting places on the internet. That's why you're here, So I think the verification stuff is interesting. I think it's essential for it to staying healthy. I think that if you rolled up the blue check as well as like additional KYC measures, know your customer measures, to really show that this is actually, Scott Hurff, this is actually insert famous celebrity that's not me. I think that could be very effective. I think there's also maybe some more creative ways to support writers that drop these crazy threads that I really appreciate and bookmark and reread and get a lot of value out of. I'm not thinking they go the Patreon route, but I think there's some vastly more creative ways than just their super follow, or recreating like a membership site.
Yeah.
So that's where I would head. There's so much nuance with this ecosystem now that it's so easy to dismiss it as just, like simple text updates. There's a lot that goes into those text updates.
Yeah.
And the distribution and all that. Like, there's just more opportunity on the table, I feel like.
Yeah, no, that's a crazy problem. I think they're going to have to get creative because everything up to date has basically been an ad supported revenue model for all social. And I'm not sure if that's fully in the cards, but I don't know. I like the idea of micropayments, integrating current cryptocurrency or other types of currency as a way to pay for kind of like you were saying, give people kind of like a tip if you read through their whole thread, or, whatever the case
Right.
may be. I think there's a lot of really interesting potential ideas on the UX front that are super unrefined that might be coming in the next, 5 to 10 years from a like shifting away from ad revenue solely.
Yeah, or like to guarantee I can build an audience and capture that audience and not be subject to the algorithms. I mean, classic Facebook pages problem, right? You just continue to get buried. So like I would invest more time on Twitter if I could know that I could get their email address really easily. And they kind of offer that with review, but it's just, why do I need review? Why do I have to go to someone's profile to get their email address or give them my email address? Like, I like to capture it in line in some way. There's all sorts of really fun things I would be willing to pay for to guarantee, visibility and
Yeah.
audience durability, I guess, right?
Yeah. No, that's cool. So, being in the product space, making, your own company now at Churnkey, you probably have a pretty good handle on how to create products, how to prioritize product features, how to design them, things like that. Maybe you can spend a few minutes riffing on kind of how you strategize, product design and product features for an application.
Yeah, I think initially, and I still do this, it's just marinating yourself in the problem. It's not really a great visual, but I'm going to go with it. I have like Matrix vibes here, in the real world. Yeah, like being really interested and excited and genuinely driven by what you see in a problem space is going to be light and day for, the effectiveness of you in that role. And if you don't like what you're working on, if you don't like, I don't know, are you helping small business owners design signage or something, get out of it, do something else. It's a very lucrative space, by the way. But, once you're in that, you're able to filter in real time, getting bad product feedback and like finding the seed of what someone was trying to do, because you understand so well the arena. You can parse that. And then the next bit would be, don't get out of thinking in systems. Your product is a system of design patterns and notification loops and engineering demands and, databases and loading time and all these sorts of things. And everything affects everything else. So like the classic, just add a button to this, it'll be fine. Famous last words, man. I mean, that's how Superlight came about. I literally redesigned the entire Tinder app, for hundreds of millions of people to incorporate a new button, one single button. But that button was tied to its own system, of notifications and algorithms and internal badging and branding and all that kind of stuff. So never get out of thinking in systems.
And I think also in that is like, you fall into the trap, especially more in the B2B space. So it's like, you just want to keep adding features. There needs to be another thing. There's a, stakeholder says they want this. And it's just like, okay, in this table that already has 10 different actions, just add another button. And It's like, how do you prioritize? How do you determine what is priority in the feature aspect of product design?
Yeah, in those cases, I try and abstract out, something that can be applied to everyone. But a lot of times too, yeah, you're right. Resist that urge to add that one button. I'm finding these days that in B2B, I think the less complex the product, the more effective it is, at least in terms of UI. And that can put the burden on you as a team behind the scenes to make stuff happen. But in reality, it's kind of what the customer wants anyway. They don't want to go in and update some forms. They just want it done, right? So I guess we're trying to like always assume action, always assume forward momentum, and just go ahead and just like, me learning how to design, I'm not asking for permission. I'm just doing it for them because I know enough about the problem, enough about why they got here that I can just go and make it happen and be like, 2 weeks later, by the way, we boosted your revenue by $1 million. Oh, okay, great. Okay. And who doesn't want to be told that? Who wouldn't want someone working on their behalf in the background? It's a software as a service. It's not just software.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, that's cool. I think there's also there's the tension between if we build something so specific and so unique to one user, maybe we're, being too hyper-focused in making this like a very pinpoint application that's only useful to one, to the specific user.
Right.
But then on the flip side is if you make it more broadly appealing, then you're just defaulting to the lowest common denominator and it potentially not being as useful of a tool. So I think there's always the tension of how seriously and how effectively do we take, user feedback, and how do we cut through what is actually a good idea versus what is something that we should definitely not do, even if it sounds like it would be really useful to that person.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there are many cases where we've been asked to ship certain features that in real time we can just be like, I know why you're asking this. It's not a bad motivation, but it's not going to get you where you want to, right? And you can edit those in real time. And obviously you say it a little bit nicer than that, or you say, okay, what is your intended outcome? What do you want from this? It's like, well, I just heard that we should have that. Like, okay, now we're talking, right? Okay. Who's telling you this, right? What do you need to show to them to make this worthwhile? Yeah, there's definitely that push and pull, but because if you are immersed in the problem, you can also in real time come up with a solution that works for them and also for this other problem you've been trying to solve across on the other side of the product. And suddenly, you connect these two ideas together and you go, whoa, this is awesome. Let's get it done. We know how to get this done suddenly, and it's shipped, the next day. So that I always love those moments too, where people are like, I cannot believe you shipped it that quickly. It's like, in a way, we've been working on this problem for, 2 years, but we just didn't know how to connect that last dot. Right.
Yeah.
And you helped us.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you kind of went from the most B2C app possible to, definitely squarely within the B2B space. Tell me a little bit about your thought process and experience going from B2C to B2B.
Yeah. I mean, like I was saying earlier, it's the classic, I'll never do that. And now I'm doing it and I love it. That it being, a B2B product. And if I look back though, I've kind of been shifting this way over the past decade. I mean, I was in pure consumer. And then I moved to two products in consumer that have very tangible, clear utility. Tinder is finding love or something in that realm, right? Casa is securing your Bitcoin without relying on an external party like Coinbase. So those are both subscription businesses that were really exciting to build, but there were definite frustrations that have bubbled up that have now informed what I'm doing at Churnkey. And that is when someone goes to cancel and they've been a great customer, there's nothing you can do, or there was nothing you could do in the moment to change their minds. And so I realized what if you could strike an equilibrium, a new equilibrium with that customer? Maybe they need to pause their payment for seasonality. Maybe they would stay for a lower price. And all that time they're answering a question, giving you feedback on how you could be better. And so it creates this awesome feedback loop between you and the customer, and everyone wins in the end. It's easy to a lot of people when I was starting out were worried about installing Churnkey because they thought it was a dark pattern. And I've seen Amazon and Netflix and Hulu and XM abuse these patterns with customers. But I realized there was a gem of a good idea there, and it could really benefit both customers and business owners down the line. And now we're doing failed payments and helping people update their cards and stuff. So we're the only platform doing both sides of churn. And what I get out of that is I get to speak with founders and operators on a very personal level about their businesses, and I get to help make them healthier. And, a rising tide lifts all boats. They get happier customers. They build a bigger business in the long term. And we work together, to solve these problems over time. And I get to do it on a relatively small scale because, compared to Tinder, I don't need 100 million customers to make this worthwhile. I need a few hundred, maybe 1,000. And this is a crazy healthy business that I've built, so it's I'm finding it just way more personable. I get to see and hear and talk to these people all the time versus I don't know who's using Tinder. I kind of know who's using Casa, but because of the nature of that product, I don't want to know who's using Casa because, for security reasons.
Yeah.
So it's been pretty cool.
That is cool. What's your end goal for Churnkey? Do you want to, is it a family business, a lifestyle business for decades? Is it something you want to scale and sell? Do you, what's your plan for that?
Yeah. I mean, I'd happily run this for years. I think the economics are phenomenal. The feeling I get, I have no regrets because I'm helping people. Yeah. So, we'll see. There's a lot of consolidation in this space, Paddle buying Profitwell and ChargeBee buying Brightback. Not a lot of people know what these companies are, but, we're our ears to the ground for sure. So we'll see, if there's an opportunity there, cool. If not, we're going to keep chugging along and just creating value. So I get to learn new skills along the way too. I never thought I would have a professional microphone at my desk, but here I am. I'm about to start producing podcasts and shows and, all kinds of stuff. So always a new challenge, always fun to see what comes across our desk and, it just keeps it fresh.
Cool. Well, Scott, this has been great. Thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate the conversation and all that you were able to share and all your insights. But yeah, appreciate it. And I'll let you have the last word.
No, Seth, grateful for the time. Awesome hanging out with you. We got to do this again. And I look forward to seeing it out in the wild.
Awesome.
Thanks so much for hanging out with us today on the Product Design Podcast. If you enjoyed our conversation, be sure and go follow our guests. Let them know they did a great job and you learned a lot. More to come in the following weeks as we bring on new guests. Please hit that subscribe button so that you will get these podcasts and learn a ton about the product design community. Excited to see you next time. Thanks.